We're all doing it, but it has so much relevance to everything in life, our health, vitality, immune system, mind, our spiritual connection. How was that for you? How was the journey?
It was a complete pain in the butt, to tell you the truth, because when you start looking into breathing, you find all these different modalities that were developed over thousands of years, but a lot of those cultures didn't talk to one another. And so as an outsider looking in, you're looking through these books that are filled with 400 different breathing practices. Okay, where do you start? What do they do? They have these titles you can't understand. At least I didn't understand. And yet we know that the benefits of these breathing techniques are scientifically validated. So how do you first go into this field? What do you start with? What do you end with? What is your approach? Do you start with the Western science or do you start with the Eastern science? And so I did all of those things at the same time and had to rewrite this book about 4 or 5 times because I just couldn't figure out the story behind the story.
What I loved about it was that it was a story, that it was your story, and you started with the storytelling of you doing this experiment, and then you weaved in all the research, the East and the West, but it was in such a storytelling way that made it so compelling. I mean, you started with plugging up your nostrils. I mean, started with something crazy.
Yeah, it's funny because my intention starting this book was never to have me a part of the story at all. I never start with that. And this was the same with my previous book. And yet you get into these situations in which the only person to do that thing at that time is you. Or else it's not going to be done. And I'm obviously curious, and I want to be able to write about this stuff from the inside, not just an outsider looking in. So that's why I thought it would be the proper thing to actually participate in some of these breathing techniques to try to study what's happening to my body and then use my body as a lens into what's happening to your body and everyone else's. So the Stanford experiment was just that, looking at mouth breathing versus nasal breathing and how those two different ways of breathing can affect your mind, your body, your snoring, your sleep, your anxiety, and more.
And this is such a Eastern way of doing science, the subjective science of, hey, I'm going to go inward and see what happens when I do this, when I breathe slow, when I breathe fast, when this happens, when I connect to nature. And these mystics from the East, thousands of years ago, developed all these techniques in the subjective science and tuning into nature and confirming with colleagues. And, you know, it's been a medicine and a science and a spiritual practice for about 4,000 years. And what I find so exciting is now, in so many regards, Western medicine and Western science and quantum physics is starting to speak the same language. And these objective science from the West and subjective science from the East are converging. And I think your book did a brilliant job in blending those two in a really compelling way. Because for me, I have such a background in the East, but when I hear the Western science confirming it, it's just like, yes. And it made me dive into some of my practices even more because of that. How is it that your journalistic background really helped you to put together this compelling book? I mean, are you a breath work teacher now? You've done so much research. You're probably an expert in the field, but are you going out and teaching breath work workshops?
Yeah, you haven't seen my closet. It's nothing but robes. I got rid of all my other clothes. And a lot of necklaces and crystals. Yeah. So thanks for asking that.
Mine is all silk robes of Tai Chi master. So
we have great Halloween costumes.
Yes, we do.
That comes around. Yeah. So my job as a journalist is to be objective and to listen to everybody and to take conversations with everyone and look at everyone's research. I don't think it's a service to the book or journalism to just go down one path and try to confirm what you thought the answer was going to be. I think it's in everyone's best interest to be curious about everything. This means the guy working in a garage who doesn't have a doctorate, and this also means the expert in the field at Stanford or Harvard. And by talking to hundreds and hundreds of these people, a story starts to develop. And so that's what I tried to do for the first few years. I was just researching every day, every night. I got pretty obsessive about this, maybe in not the healthiest way, because I could see that there was a story behind the stories we're usually told, both in biology text, in an ancient Chinese text, ancient Hindu text. There was something else that everyone could agree on, that the science has validated. And along with that, breathing's so great because it's easy to measure. So once you have measurements, once you see this happening to yourself, look at your heart rate, look at your blood pressure, circulation, oxygenation, then you begin to open up a bit more, that after a few seconds of breathing a certain way, your body changes, your brain changes. So what happens when you breathe this way for a couple of days? What happens after a couple of weeks or a couple of months? Well, I'll tell you what happens. I've seen people absolutely transformed by this. And this isn't anything woo-woo. This is biology. This is taking our most basic biological function and honing it and being able to process air, which is where we get most of our energy, more efficiently. Of course, your body's going to respond to that. So there isn't a huge leap between these things, understanding how breathing differently can benefit people with asthma or autoimmune diseases or depression or lethargy or on and on and on, because of course it does.
In Chinese medicine, breath is called the commander of qi, your life force energy. So when we look at qi, which means aliveness, what are those substances that make us alive? So we have food, and you have water and sleep and breath, but our breath is the quickest source to this life force energy. It's the quickest source to qi. And I love in your book, you research some ancient texts, and these are, Qigong texts or Taoist texts talking about breath. And almost always in the text of working with life force energy, they talk about how to breathe in conjunction with movement. And that seems to be what was called the prevention of disease. And so you've seen it now in all this research that you've done. How does breath really affect our health?
Breathing is movement. You can't breathe without movement, and movement is breathing. So breathing dictates your posture, okay? And your posture dictates how you're going to breathe. So if I'm hunched over like this, working on my computer all night, how well am I going to be breathing here? Not very well. I can't take a nice, fluid, deep, and easy breath here. But if I'm like this, and I'm conscious about my posture, this is what makes the body very happy. You can engage your diaphragm more. You can breathe more easily. So those two things together, again, it's not a huge leap of logic to think, oh, how you move might affect how you might breathe. And if you look at what yoga was thousands and thousands of years ago, before it made it into gyms and became Vinyasa Flow, which has been around. No problem with Vinyasa Flow. I do it all the time. Huge fan of it. It's 100 years old. It's not thousands of years old. So yoga was a practice of breathing and holding poses. So there was nothing else more than that. And if you look at what was happening in China shortly after that, it's the same thing. It's breathing and holding poses. And when you breathe into different parts of your body, when you adjust your body, you are going to be breathing differently. You're going to be stretching different areas of the lungs. You're going to be massaging the organs in different ways. So these are two cultures that came up with basically the same exact technology on how to focus this energy that is our breath. Yeah,
beautiful. In Qigong, we often will do exactly that. I'm always like, when I'm teaching stretching, it's not about the stretch, it's about the breath within the stretch. It's not how far you stretch, it's how well you stretch or how well you breathe into stretches. And if we reframe stretching into each pose as a different breath exercise, it becomes really different. It becomes non-competitive, and we don't compete with ourselves into a stretch or a pose. And the nice thing in Qigong, we go into flows. And flows is specifically training to get into flow state. And there's a lot of talk about flow state as peak performance, as about entering the moment, as about being inspired by what you're doing. And so I find breath to be so key and instrumental into accessing flow state. What do you think?
I believe that the benefits of meditation at the beginning don't really have much to do with the actual focus. I know that those benefits come on later. You can grow more gray area. You can do all of these amazing things for your brain and your body. No doubt about that. But for the person just starting, what do you do when you're about to meditate? Okay, sit down and focus on your breath. I don't know of any meditation that doesn't have you start with your breathing. So I started looking at, well, what if you just do that breathing? and you don't do the meditation, you know, you don't have to put on your yoga pants or sit in a corner or look at a deity. You can just sit there and focus on your breathing. And just doing that, and there's been various studies looking at this, of how just breathing in different ways will activate different areas of your brain function, will allow you to make more logical and reasoned decisions, because your prefrontal cortex is more aligned with your emotional centers of your brain, so you're not having these outbursts of emotion. It will lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, hormone regulation, everything. And again, this I don't view this as any far-off thing. We're breathing 20,000, 25,000 times a day. If you're doing that dysfunctionally, how do you think your body's going to react? Well, I'll tell you, go and look at the world right now. Go look at populations in the world, and you'll see it all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned posture in relation to breath, and now that you mentioned that, I notice I'm sitting up taller and breathing a little deeper.
You mentioned that, and I just realized what a slob I am.
That's good. But posture, it also relates to emotions. So you start to see breath connected to everything: mental, emotional states, physical states. I mean, when you sit like this, and when you look at somebody who's depressed, their posture is often down, and somebody who's inspired or happy, they're often up. And it's because with a different posture, you breathe different, and you're communicating to your mind and body in different ways. So would you say that breath is a way in which we communicate between these different aspects of ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, our physiology, in that bridge?
If you're looking at the connections between the brain and the body, about 80% of those messages are coming from the body to the brain. So it's not just the brain controlling everything. The brain needs input. So by just controlling your breathing, you can send positive messages to your brain. And again, this isn't psychology, this is biology. This is how the body works. So you can actually use your breathing to overtake this stress response, anxiety responses, by just controlling your breathing, by breathing slowly. And then your brain gets the signal that, okay, everything's okay. I'm in a safe place. I'm going to down-regulate right now. I'm going to think more reasonably. And I'm going to be able to function more efficiently. And that really, to me, is what it's all about. And of course, posture plays into this. If you're like this and if you're closed up, how much of the diaphragm is able to move here? Not a lot. So you start breathing into the chest, and your body registers that as a stress response. Because guess what happens when we're scared? We hold our breath because we're trying to hide from something, or we breathe too much because our body is ramping up to fight something off or to run away. So we do this all day, which is why so many of the modern chronic diseases right now are tied to chronic inflammation. If you look at diabetes, if you look at heart disease, you can just go down the list: increased risk of stroke, hypertension. This is all tied to this low-grade stress throughout the day, and breathing plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, and stress is such an interesting topic, because stress is the root cause of so many illnesses. And what is stress but a perception? It's not actually real most of the time, but we start to perceive. And then how does that stress, that perception of stress, get into our nervous system? It's through our breath. We start changing our breathing. Your body and your nervous system start to say, oh, we must be stressed. There must be some life-threatening thing. And so then we have these chronic ailments because of stress. I read an interesting statistic, which was 89% of all primary doctor visits are stress-related. So almost 90% of the reasons we get sick are due to stress. And so if we change our breath, we change that perception of chronic stress, and we switch into rest and digest, where your body heals. How does breath get us into that healing state?
Well, I think you're right with that perceived danger, and that's an important word, perceived, because our bodies have all of these different amazing functions that have allowed us to survive for so long as a species, right? And I love those functions. Those functions can be used, and we can benefit from them greatly. But we should not be in these certain functions throughout the day. So we've developed these sympathetic responses, that quicker breathing or holding your breath, to there's a woolly mammoth coming into the cave. Hold your breath.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now it's coming after me. Let's get the respiration up. Let's deliver oxygen to the whole body so that we can run run harder, right?
Yeah.
Or stab it or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that today our perception of stress, we're so sensitized that we'll open our emails and we'll see an email from a coworker or from a boss or from a partner, and that stress response goes up to basically the same level it would have gone up to if we were, getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
So, but we don't know how to turn it down. And so then another email comes, and then constantly flooding your body with adrenaline and cortisol is going to wear it down. No one's going to argue this, right? But the question is, it's like, okay, we're constantly stressed. What do we do about it? And breathing is the quickest intervention. Yeah, you can go on vacation. You can take long, warm baths. All that, you can dance, movement, yoga, that's great. But what do you do at the moment, right there? It's not about popping some goo into your mouth. It's about controlling your breathing, down-regulating your nervous system, trying to get rid of some of that stress so you can operate more efficiently. I keep using that word, efficiency, but compensation, just getting by, is different than efficiency and health. And so many of us are just compensating. We can do that for a long time. After a while, it's going to break us down.
Yeah, it's like we're not thriving in life. We're surviving, but it's not a every day being like, oh, I'm inspired, I feel good. I mean, always thinking about how do we get out of survival mode, right, where those emails or the traffic or your boss or your relationships and putting you into woolly mammoth kind of stress. And we're moving into the heart, so we live with more joy, more compassion, more connection, which is where we want to be. Here's the question. Stress isn't always bad, and we can use stress to strengthen ourselves. And this can be seen in the breathwork techniques, is that we put ourselves consciously into stress mode so that we can override it and work with it in shorter periods of time so that it's not overtaking us in long periods of time. This is called hormetic stress, right? We put our breath or respiratory system under stress like you would weightlifting. How does that work?
Well, this was something that when I mentioned reading all those yoga books, it's like, okay, some of them say breathe through your nose and breathe very calmly and softly. It's like, great, I get that. I can feel that. But then you have these methods where you're breathing as fast as you can, holding your breath, breathing more, holding it in, scrunching. And I said, this is completely against what I had just learned. And so I went down this deep hole of research and found that these other breathing techniques, I call them breathing plus. I just put them all in this umbrella because once you understand the foundation of breathing, you can start going off into these other areas. But it's important to understand that foundation, nasal breathing, controlled breathing, slow breathing, all of that. But what they do is they purposely elicit a stress response in our bodies. And they compound that stress so that we can spend 20 days in that mode of stress, breathing as hard as we can, so the other 23 and a half hours a day, we can be extremely calm and relaxed. So it's about that 20 minutes a day. Sorry about that. It's been a long day driving down here. So that 20 minutes a day. Do not spend 20 days in stress, people. Bad idea. 20 minutes a day, 15, 20 minutes a day. It's like a pressure release valve. And I'm a huge fan of these breathing practices. I do them all the time, and I would be pretty bummed out if I didn't have them in my life to revert to them.
They seem to power up your energy. So 20 minutes a day, it's like exercise. You exercise 20 minutes a day. Go hard 20 minutes, and you get in good shape. So 20 minutes of practicing breathwork techniques gets your respiratory system in good shape and stronger, more powerful. And when we look at it from a Chinese medicine perspective, it gives you more qi, because breath is qi. And qi is what? Life force, energy. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to put yourself under a little bit of stress by breathing fast or emulating almost like a stressful pattern, holding the breath, breathing fast. And what I find is that when you come out of that, all of a sudden you can breathe slower and deeper, so much more efficiently and effortlessly.
That's exactly right. And a lot of people may have heard of Wim Hof. And when you see Wim Hof on a video, he's saying, everyone breathe as much as you can. Everybody hold your breath, breathe. I've talked with Wim so many times now, and That's the guy in front of the stage doing that for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, he is completely chill, breathing so slowly, humming a lot, and people don't see that other side because it's boring. Yeah. You don't want to see someone just sitting there and breathing slowly. You want to see someone saying, go for it. Yeah. But the important part of this is to make the respiratory system, to make your body, to make your nervous system flexible. And so once you learn how to turn on this stress, you learn how to turn it off. So when other stress happens and you notice yourself breathing too much, I'm breathing too much, I'm going to slow this down and I'm going to reverse this stress, which is why these hormetic stress or hormesis, this is so effective for people with autoimmune diseases who their immune systems are running amok. They need this reset. And there's been a lot of research into this lately, which is fascinating to think, like arthritis, you can blunt some of the symptoms or reverse it with breathing. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Psoriasis, eczema, like all of these people who had these chronic problems that they were told were incurable. For 10 years, they took various drugs, wasn't really working. Maybe it was a Band-Aid for the symptoms. They learn how to breathe, some cold exposure. They connect back to their bodies, and they're like, this is weird. Now I don't have this chronic inflammation. I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone. There's no blanket prescription, but this stuff is free. It's available to us, and why not try it? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to feel better. That's not too bad.
That's not bad. That's a side effect of this kind of medicine, right?
That is the major side effect, is feeling better.
Feel better. Okay, let's do that. Here's how the medicine worked in Chinese medicine in ancient times. You would pay your doctor, your acupuncturist, or your qigong master, and as soon as you got sick, you stopped paying. So I think that is true healthcare. Like, hey, I don't feel good. I got this problem. I got neck tension. Okay, stop paying me. I'm not doing my job. That is healthcare. Now we have sick care, right? You don't go to your doctor and say, hey, I feel great. What should I do? They don't have any answers, because health is not, in the East, is not a destination. It's always a journey. So you're always breathing, we're always eating, we're always moving, we're always taking care of. What am I doing today to invest in my precious life force energy? And breath is always, like you said, always the starting point. Okay, let's start with breathing. And so we can access the body's healing power and stay healthy. How do you think breath relates to prevention?
I think what you said there is what is exactly happening in Western medicine right now. Maybe it's not coming from the institutions, but look at all of these different wearables, right? If you're following the prescription delivered from these wearables as far as your sleep is concerned, your blood glucose or your nervous system function, the moment you start getting sick, you're going to be like, this thing doesn't work. I'm going to throw this. I'm not going to subscribe to this monthly fee anymore to do this because it's not working. So I see this big flip happening right now, and it's only because things have broken down and gotten so terrible in healthcare. And I heard this from doctors. This is not my opinion. There's doctors in my family. They said it's gotten so bad that people are now needing to rebuild this. Now we're going to have this breakthrough because we've had this breakdown of the system. So I believe that is coming up out of necessity. Humans are very reactive. So it's only when we're really injured, when we're really hurt, that we do anything about anything. So I see that this is what's happening with health. And it's fascinating that this was the model of Chinese medicine.
Isn't it?
For thousands of years. Yeah,
Let's focus on, because what we focus on grows stronger. So like if you're focused on movement and breath, if your focus is on vitality, it grows. But unfortunately, we have a focus on sickness. And even though we have great technology, Western medicine, incredible technology, we have more sickness, disease, problems, side effects than ever before.
Yeah, and I am a huge fan of Western medicine. I want to be clear. If I get in a car accident, I don't want acupuncture. Maybe afterwards during the recovery. Don't try your breathing methods, right? If someone stabs you in the chest. Go to a doctor and get it sewn up. Take your antibiotics. Do all of that stuff. But it doesn't have to be this or that. It's not a binary thing. These things are starting to, these areas are starting to talk to one another right now in a big way, and this is the way.